Hey-o, what's up, everybody? It's episode number 170 of the Audible Farm Podcast, and this episode is brought to you by Couchtown Coffee. Couchtown Coffee is roasted right here in Iowa. It's my favorite coffee. Here's a fun story. My coffee grinder broke recently, so I was using... Oh, you ready for this? I was using a smoothie blender to grind my coffee. Not recommended. Didn't work out the best. I mean, it worked, but... yeah, not what it's designed for. So what did I get for Christmas? Boom, coffee grinder. Isn't it fun being like a quote-unquote adult and getting Christmas gifts? Well, get yourself a gift. Get some Couchtown Coffee. Go to couchtowncoffee.com. Find a coffee you like. Let them know how you want it roasted. And when you make your order, let them know Audible Farm sent you. And they'll give you 20% off. Why? Because Couchtown Coffee's that awesome. Thanks, Couchtown. This is the year-end roundup. I thought I did one last year. I guess I didn't. I did one a couple years ago, though. These are pretty fun. I'm just going to talk about things that happened in my life this last year. Maybe not necessarily just music related. I kind of like open my purse up and just dump it out all over the table. So it's kind of a fun one. I usually don't get this open in podcasts, but I talk about some fun stuff. It was a great year, and I talked to a lot of fun people on the podcast. I played a lot of shows. It was very eventful for me this year. I did a lot of things, so... stick with it for the ride. This is a little bit shorter than normal because it's a solo episode, but I do a little bit of a year-end roundup, so hope you guys enjoy it. Episode 170, 2021 Roundup.
It's the Audible Farm Podcast with your host, Peter Stockdale.
Hey, all right, it is the roundup for 2021. I did one of these in 2019, and I thought I did one in 2020, but I looked back and I apparently did not. So this was something I did, like I said, in 2019. I thought it was kind of a fun thing to sit down and go back through and kind of talk about what happened this year, and maybe only on my end, maybe kind of some other stuff that's happened, but this is just kind of what I feel like has happened throughout the course of 2021. And I know a lot of people were really kind of thinking that like 2020 was horrible, and it was kind of weird. 2021, people didn't think a lot of things got better, and there's all these, memes and jokes online about, this is me skating into 2022 or whatever. So I definitely don't feel the same way. So I feel like 2021 was actually like a great year, and it was quite a bit better than 2020. At least that's just like my take on it. So for example, in 2020 I lost my job during COVID, but I did finish school, and then in 2021 I picked up a new job, and then there was a little point in time there where I didn't have a job this year, and it was kind of weird because I didn't know, I was kind of just, it's like when you're sitting there and you're like, what do I do with my hands? I don't know. And that's kind of just how I felt, just like in general, because, obviously I just didn't have anything to fill my time up. So in 2020 into 2021, for that little period of time, I kind of buckled down and just did a bunch of weird things. I made, repainted guitars, and those videos of a lot of those guitar refinishes are on the Audible Farm YouTube channel. And I did a few of those. I picked up some more projects to work on for other people. Unfortunately, getting a job kind of put a damper on some of those things. Sorry for the Patreon people. I'm going to adjust this camera. It's going to be a little weird, but it'll work. Anyways, so, I feel like 2021 was pretty good to me, and 2020 was maybe the rougher year of the two, but I still found things to keep myself busy. Like I said, refinishing guitars. Last year I made a couple of music videos for Clint Riedel, and, it just kind of turned out like pretty much the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, I started playing a lot of shows with Jesse Wilson. And I know there's other people that feel the same way I do about kind of teaming up with another musician and going out there and doing something. I've seen a couple posts about it at the end of the year. One of them actually from a recent guest on the podcast. kind of sparked my interest in this thought process. But I mean, I recently had Jesse on and I talked about it a little bit. Like, I probably wouldn't be out there playing as many shows if it wasn't for him. And on top of that, it's not like he wouldn't be able to play as many shows without me. He's shown that he's really adaptable to other musicians. And I mean, I've kind of shown that to an extent this year as well, where I've been able to do side gigs with other musicians. And I had a couple of people hit me up to do one-off gigs with them and things like that. So it was kind of fun to be able to go and stretch your wings out with other people. But I do feel like being able to play with Jesse and go to play a new style of music and at new venues and play those longer sets, where if you've been listening to this podcast for the last few years, you will notice that in the beginning I was pretty much just a punk rock style musician. Those were my main gigs, and I'd play anywhere from a half an hour to an hour. Sometimes we'd play the rare 2-hour long punk rock set, but we'd do things like that. But I was always interviewing these people that were in cover bands or singer-songwriters and things like that, and it's like, how in the world do you go about covering 4 hours? It's mind-blowing. So needless to say, I've ventured into that area this year, and it was tough at first. I'm sure Jesse will say the same thing. Those 4-hour gigs, they're killer. They're long, and I mean, we even did one where we played 4 and they paid us to play another hour, and then they paid us to play another half an hour, and it's like, holy cow. I mean, how much time can you actually fill? But once again, that goes back to playing with Jesse. He's adaptable to a lot of those things, where he's not scared to try and cover a song. Even if he doesn't know how it goes, he'll see if he can do it on the fly, and a lot of times it's really good. I mean, there's some songs where, based on a request, he's added it to his set list. So that's one of, like I said, one of my favorite things about playing along with Jesse is I have to adapt to what he's doing, and things aren't as cut and dry as they would have been, in the punk rock days or like the metal days when I was in a metal band there for a while. About a year I was in Unity, band from Iowa, and we played shows across Iowa and even into the Chicago area and stuff like that. So that was tons of fun to be able to play shows with them. But like I said, a lot of those shows were it's not as chiseled out as this, but it's pretty much here's the notes, you got to play them, and we're going to play it really fast, and this is the time frame that you're slotted for, and you have to set up and be done and in a certain amount of time, and that was something else I was kind of conveying at a recent jam night when some people were setting up, and I was like, it is kind of weird because I went through two completely different setup processes. When you play those 4-hour long shows, you can kind of just show up, an hour early or whatever, and set your stuff up and do a little sound check, or maybe show up even earlier so you have more time to do all this stuff. Or maybe you go play at a club venue and you're only slotted for a half an hour, and they give you 10 minutes to set up before the show, and they do a sound check right there on the fly, and away you go. So there's two different things, some of them it's just you have to hurry up, get all your stuff up there, plug it in, get it ready, do your sound check, because you don't want to make the next band late. You don't want to make the next band late. So you got to try your best to be as quick and adaptable to those types of restraints. And that's kind of a crazy thing to think about when you think about when I play with Jesse. I bring pretty much the same amount of equipment to either show. About the only thing I don't really have to worry about is running a mixer or a microphone at a club. A lot of times I'll either bring my own mic or something like that. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy to think about those two different, like I said, I bring very similar setups to both shows, and it's just kind of weird how the one I have to really hurry through and the other one I really don't have to. So it's kind of neat to think about those differences and those things that, when I first started this podcast weren't even a glint in my mind. And now it's my, every day, it's my, well, not every day, but it's every week or so, I play a show with Jesse, pretty much every week, it's almost what it averages out to. So it's kind of crazy to think about that, and I went from when I first started this podcast, I think one of the first years I started this podcast, yeah, it might have been the year before I started this. Like Three Finger Betty did like 40 some shows in a year, and me and Jesse capped out over that. My list is down there on the floor. I don't want to reach and go get it, but if I had to guess, I would say I played 80 shows this year, which is also insanity considering, like I said in the beginning of this podcast, I got a job this year, so I do have a full-time job now, and I'm doing the podcast, and I'm playing 80 shows a year, and I'm giving guitar lessons, albeit I don't have very many students for lessons, but it's kind of wild to think about all that stuff, and if the podcast seems like, I've been kind of struggling to get them out there on time and things like that as of late, I kind of have, and it's unfortunate. I'm sorry. I really am, but it's just the way it goes, I enjoy playing music, and that's one of the reasons I started the podcast, was because of my enjoyment of music, and that's definitely going to be first and foremost. So if I have like too many gigs and I have to work extra, which has been the case as of late, not that people don't ever have to work extra, I'm not making excuses, but I'm just saying, like, the podcast is definitely slightly farther down on the totem pole than a couple of my other things that I enjoy in my life. So I have been trying my best to get the podcast episodes out in a timely fashion. I know I was late recently, and I did skip a week recently, but I was also sick. I don't know if you guys can still hear a little bit of it in my voice, but that's what'll happen when you're sick for a little while. So I do appreciate everybody listening each and every week. I've had some really fun, really amazing guests on the podcast. Let me see if I can just scroll back far enough in this little doodad. I'm going to pull it up online here, and we'll see if we can look through some of the past episodes, because like I said, this has been a really fun year. And I would like to go slightly chronologically through some of this, just to kind of try to remember what happened. Let's see here. 1 year ago. So what was the first episode this year? Was it Scott Kirkhart? Did I begin and end the year with Scott Kirkhart? Is that how this worked? I gotta pull this up here. Let's see. Oh man, I don't want to click on too much here. Oh yeah, I feel like if I click on this, it's gonna start dinking with some stuff. I don't know what the upload date on that one was, but yeah, I think I began the year with Scott Kirkhart, maybe, which is kind of wild because I ended the year with Scott Kirkhart almost. So yeah, that's pretty wild. I ended the year last year with Brad Hansen instead of doing the recap. So yeah, I think that's pretty much where I'm at. And I mean, there's a lot of people in here that have still playing music, still changing their way through music and doing different things. And I mean, there's a lot of people up here in my local area that I interviewed recently, and a lot of people that I did not know that I talked to, for the first time, or you got to hear us meeting each other for the first time. Like Ty Frazier, he was another one that I did, and Ryan Craig, albeit I had them on my Facebook, but it's kind of crazy to think that, a lot of these conversations I've had with a lot of people, you guys have actually just sat down and listened to me meeting people for the first time, which is mind blowing. I can't believe that. It's really wild. But I've met a lot of really good people, and I've actually made a lot of really good friends just from interviewing people, especially people I didn't know who they were. So, hats off to everybody. Like Mason over at the Regional Rock Hour. I know that Three Finger Betty's going to be playing a show up in the Fort Dodge area, so I can't wait to say hi to him when I'm up, over there. And I mean, I'm up in that area anyways most of the time, so he does like to go out to those shows though, so that's going to be a really fun time having him out there. And then you start to see some of the solo episodes start to pour in this year too, which was kind of weird. I try my best not to do them because I want this to be like a guest-driven podcast, but I also don't want to just not put an episode out. And I've had a lot of people tell me they actually really like the solo episodes. So I do know for a fact, based on statistics alone, that the solo episodes usually get less listens than most of the other episodes. And the solo episodes are usually a little shorter because, well, I don't have anyone to bounce ideas off of. So, I guess those are just what they are, and I really appreciate everyone that gives me positive feedback on those. It's pretty wild to hear, people say, like, especially people that have done podcasts, so like, isn't it weird doing a podcast alone by yourself? And it's like, yeah, how do some people just sit here and do this with the stream of consciousness? And it's not easy. I mean, you can listen back to 5 minutes ago in this podcast, and I was just like, I don't know. So it's not always as easy as it could be just to fill up an hour by yourself talking. And I do have like a tiny little bit of, notes here just to kind of cover some things, but it's like 4 words on a piece of paper. So that's not going to fill an hour. So you got to kind of plug in some stuff in the middle. But I talked to Cameron Smith and Micah Smith this year. Those 2 were back to back. I'm pretty sure they're not related. Zachary Daniels, Mike Duty, Harold Waits. Oh man, this is cool. Mackenzie Schwanke. It's a fun one. Vinny and the Night Prowlers. I don't know if I got my Vinny shirt. I do have my, everybody on the Patreon gets to see my Vinny and the Night Prowlers shirt. One of my, that's crazy. Mackenzie and Vinny were back to back because I met both of them while I went back to college, which is kind of a crazy thing to think of. Like, I think I said it in a previous solo episode, but I never thought I'd go back to college as an adult and make a lot of friends, but that's the case. So, hats off to those guys for being cool. Matt Woods, always one of the best guests on the podcast. I don't care what anybody says. The guy holds no quarter. He's very down to earth. He's honest, and it's just one of my favorite things about him. He's just such a good person, on top of being, a good musician. I don't, toot Matt Woods. I'm gonna go see him. Well, I guess the day that this comes out Thursday, so I'm gonna go see him tonight at Shiny Top. If you're listening the day this came out, so Shiny Top, Fort Dodge, get there. That's gonna be where it's at. So Matt Woods, hats off to you, cool guy. James Tyler with Ethan Kane from Late Street. James Tyler, sat down with him. Ethan joined us about halfway through. That was a fun episode. I've actually shared the stage with James Tyler a few times, playing songs with Jesse Wilson, which is really wild because James did a feature on a Jesse Wilson song. So it's really cool to sit down and do a podcast with someone, and then later in the year you're like, oh dude, I'm on stage with this guy. That's kind of cool. So Giannis Alexakis, once again, a crazy fun episode with somebody I barely knew. I just kind of randomly met, and that was a fun one. Once again, we see some solo episodes. Jesse Wilson, hats off to him. John Waugh, man, the figurehead from Three Finger Betty. Gotta love that guy. Clint Riedel, I played some shows with him this year. He's kind of been inviting me out here and there to play shows with him when he, feels up to it. And it's kind of fun to get out there and play some of his tunes, because I don't know, we were just playing some random tunes at a jam night recently, and I was like, man, I love playing some of your songs. They're just so fun. And some of it is it's folk music, so I can't go too nuts, and you just add pretty bits, around what he's doing, and away you go. It's so much fun to sit there and play with him, and I just enjoy his songs and his storytelling. I do recall playing a show with him this year, and I guess it was actually a teacher of mine that I went to college, and they were at the venue, and I was just like, oh, hey, I'm playing music tonight. And they were like, I'll stick around for some of this. And we were at a Clint Riedel show, and they were like, is that real? Are all these, is what they're saying, is what Clint's saying? Yeah, it's all real. It's 100% real. So it's kind of crazy to think about that, that all these stories are based off true events, and I would say they're 99% real. But I don't know. I guess I also didn't write them, and I'm only doing all this third hand or whatever through what I understand. But it's pretty cool to think that Clint's got probably 100 songs in his songbook. Doesn't play them all, but at least not all the time. He did actually bust his songbook out and learned a bunch of old songs, then was showed up to a jam and just was playing all these deep cuts, and it was pretty cool to hear all these songs I'd only heard a couple times ever. He's playing them again. Oh, sorry for the pause. Thought I was gonna sneeze or something. Mackenzie joined me on the podcast again. Owen O'Brien, the boy wonder. That's cool. Chris Anderson, listened to the podcast, came to a jam night in Barnum, Iowa, which is a sleeper of an awesome time. I almost don't want to promote it because it's that cool. But you should go to Barnum. Tuesday nights, there's a jam night. It's one of the funnest things ever. Every week's completely different, and that's one of the things that makes it awesome. But There it was. So Chris Anderson did show up, and he showed up based on like me talking about it on the podcast. And he made a lot of good friends up there. It was really fun to see him and meet him. And he ended up, booking a couple gigs up north and booked some of my buddies some gigs down, in the Des Moines metro area. So it's really kind of cool to, this podcast, believe it or not, brought that on. And that's how I met Chris. And he's such a good guy too. So hats off to him. Oh, good old Caleb Ferry. Oh yeah, I remember. Caleb Ferry, that was a fun episode. Sit down talking with him. Some of these episodes seems like they were just yesterday, and like that episode was like 6 months ago. That's wild to think. Nick Earhart, another one. He's been on the podcast before. I've played with him on stage before, so hats off to him. He's one of the nice guys out there. I've never once heard anybody say anything bad about Nick Earhart. Not to say, people are talking bad about everyone else, but Nick Earhart, he's one of the good guys out there. Emily Johnson, another fun one. I don't know why I'm always intimidated by good singers. It was the same way when I interviewed Carson Steve not too long ago. And I don't know. I think it's just because I'm not super great at singing. So when I hear people that sing super well, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm never singing around this person, But, it's easy to be intimidated. It's kind of like playing guitar. When somebody else is really good, you're like, I don't know if I want to play around this person. They're really good. They're really good. So I don't know. That was a fun episode, though. More solo episodes. Yuck City. I mean, the solo episodes are fun. You're listening to one right now, so I don't know. Rock and roll. They start coming in really frequently later this year, and that stinks. I had thought about just doing the podcast every other week, and then that would eliminate some of the solo episodes, but that's only 26 episodes a year, and I don't know if I could choose only 26 people to talk to. Plus, it's kind of fun to, hear some of the repeat guests and hear what they're up to. So, but there were a lot of new guests this year. Like Mary Lee Johnson was another new guest. She's a comedian, and it's always fun to sit down and talk with her. That was a pretty long episode, and that was really fun. Jeremy Ober was on again. We were talking the Reforge Initiatives scholarship fundraiser. That was a fun one. That was one of the guitars that I ended up refinishing for him, and that one turned out really cool. The secret behind that guitar was it was hydro dipped, but the wild thing about it was all the paint that was used in it was just like leftover bits of paint that I had from like other projects I'd done, whether or not they be guitars or whatever they are. Not that I'm much of an artist, but I do like to just fart around with some of that stuff. That's kind of a weird way to say it. I do like to play my hand, I guess, with art a little bit if I can. So that was a really fun guitar. You can check that out. Once again, Audible Farm YouTube channel's got those refinishing videos, and you can check that episode out with Jeremy. That was a really fun episode too. I don't know, like I've interviewed Jeremy a few times on the podcast. He was one of the first people I interviewed, and it was like nothing against him. It just wasn't a good episode because I didn't know what I was doing. It was like the 5th episode I'd ever done or something like that. I didn't know how to interview people. I didn't know what I was going to do on the podcast. So that was kind of a weird one. And then like that last one I did with him, like I said, this year, that was a banger. I had such a fun time sitting down talking with him that episode. It was so fun. So, the more I get around the area and see Jeremy and play with him at jam nights and talk to him. And I've known him for a while, but it's still just super fun to get to know, he's a good dude, and he's, I think it comes back to that talented people and maybe being a little bit intimidated. And it's not that I am intimidated, but it is kind of crazy just to be like, go out there and watch him play and just be like, dude, this guy's on another level. And there's those people out there, and it's fun because I think in that episode he talks about how there's people in the area that he thinks are on another level. So I guess it's all down to perspective. So, once again, that's one of the reasons that made that episode so good. He just kind of cut loose in that one. It was really fun. And I'm just kind of scrolling through the episodes of this last year, and there's been a lot more solo episodes, unfortunately. Cole Smothers plays drums with Jesse Wilson and the Rascals, as well as with other people. That was a fun one. Had a blast sitting down talking with him. Eric Lee, another young phenom, along with Owen O'Brien. I couldn't imagine being half as talented as those two are at their age. It's wild. I mean, I couldn't imagine being half as talented as either one of them, just period. Eric can play guitar and sing, and I can only play guitar, so maybe I'm half as talented as him. And yeah, I don't know. Owen makes more noise on less strings than I do, and that's somehow, those two guys are crazy. Met both of them at a jam night, and they've been coming to jam nights pretty consistently ever since. So there are a lot of these people are people that I met at jam nights, or, you know, that's pretty much what the podcast is. It was just people I had interaction with. And when I was playing a lot of punk shows, I was interviewing a lot of people from different bands around the state or beyond, just because those were people I ran into all the time. And now it's kind of like a weird mishmash of people I know from my area, people I've met at jam nights, or people I've seen at a show, or, you know, like this next one was somebody I went to when I graduated from a community college, and I went to a 4-year school. This was somebody I met at the 4-year school. So it's kind of crazy. I got people I met at 2 different colleges on here. This is Sid Bowie, and she is an amazing singer. She's got, I mean, if you're into pop music, check it out. You're gonna be blown away. You're like, this is made in Iowa? It's like, yeah, this is made right here in Iowa. Super cool, great music videos. That was a fun episode too, to sit down and talk with her and catch up with her. I just sent her a random message like, you still making music? She says, yeah. And I'm like, oh man, you're coming on the podcast. And so we met up, and that was a fun one. Mike Walsh, another great episode. That one was tons of fun. Scott Dahl comes on every year. Scott Dahl talks about the Rockin' Picnic, one of my favorite shows to go to. When I was first kind of cutting my teeth with music and figuring out what was going on in my mid to late 20s, I was like, I got to figure out how to play the guitar. So when I was figuring it all out, that was kind of one of my things, was like, I want to play at the Rockin' Picnic one year. And then when, you know, Scott figured out, I believe we were at a jam night together, and he was just like, oh, you can play. And I was like, yeah, I figured it out, I guess, so I figured out how to do stuff. And he invited me to play at the Rockin' Picnic, and we did. It was fun. This year I played with Jesse Wilson. Last year, I do not believe I played with anybody, but I think Jesse and Clint both played solo sets. I think that last year was the year I'd practiced. This most recent year, though, I did end up playing with them on stage. That was a crazy day too, because I believe, because the Rockin' Picnic is on Sunday, I believe we had already played either 1 or 2 shows that weekend. I might have played one with Three Finger Betty, but yeah, the Rockin' Picnic night, we ended up double dipping. We played Rockin' Picnic, and then afterwards we ducked out to go play another gig, which was, wild. I don't know if I've ever played 2 gigs in a day before, but that was, a first for me. So hats off to those fun experiences like that. Unfortunately, we're scrolling through more solo episodes. They're going to get more frequent here towards the end of the year. Clint Riedel, one of the most frequent guests. Speaking of frequent, one of the first people I met on here randomly that I didn't know, and I had just a blast sitting down talking with. So, hats off to him. Michael Husky. Oh my gosh, this is one of the most listened to episodes I've ever done. Michael Husky is the great nephew of Ferlin Husky, and if there's going to be a lot of the older people out there know who Ferlin is, but that was a great episode. Randomly met him at a singer-songwriter event in Iowa City that I tagged along with Jesse to, and that's another thing, like, I got to meet so many of these cool people just from playing music with Jesse, so hats off to him. But yeah, me and Michael met up outside and did a podcast. That one's a fun one too. There's a little kind of like a guest appearance on that one, so that was really fun. But like I said, that was one of the most listened to, that is the most listened to episode I've ever had. It has more listens than any other episode, so check that one out. That's a really good one. I had a blast with that one. I know the audio is a little quieter on that one, but it's still audible, still sounds great, so check that one out. It was tons of fun. Michael's such a great guy. Recently moved, but I want to have him back on again sometime. He's got such a fun story, and I don't think we even covered the tip of the iceberg in this. Just such a fun one. You got to check it out. Josh Stewart was on an episode. That was cool to meet him. That was another random Facebook meet. We had friends in common, and he was just like, "Hey, I kind of know you," and I was like, "Yeah, I kind of know you." So we did a podcast together, and that was really fun too, to sit down and do that one. Unfortunately, another solo episode was in there. The Heavy Radio episode, I was a guest on Heavy Radio with a couple of guys from the old Dark Mirror days. And that was, those were some of the first bands, Dark Mirror was some of the first music, as a band I saw. And I just couldn't believe, it's like, man, people are making this great of music as a hobby. How is that done? So hats off to those guys. I don't think Eric and Marco know how much their music when I was like fresh out of high school really actually meant to me. It's metal music for those that don't know. Clint Wheelman, who's been on the podcast before, possibly under a different name, he's been on the podcast before, Three Finger Betty drummer, and he played with Dark Mirror for 10 plus years. So that's kind of how I got in with some of those guys and met them. And, that was fun to be on the podcast with those guys. Promoted an awesome show that I played on. So Three Finger Betty played with Raven this year. I think I talked about that in one of these many solo episodes that have happened towards the end of the year. But yeah, that was great. Great to sit down and talk with them. Great to play with Raven. Raven just is insane. That was a fun show too. All the old school metal guys from the Des Moines scene and around came in. So good to see them. It reminded me of the old days, like 10 years ago. I feel like it's not like nobody goes to shows anymore, but all the people I went to shows with were kind of close-ish to my age, and now they're still close-ish to my age. And a lot of the people I went to all these shows with or saw at shows, could have moved, could have a different job, could have got a family, could be doing something, so it's kind of crazy to think about that, how the scene has changed so much. But there was like 5 people in the room that I haven't seen in years, and we picked it up like nothing happened, like it was yesterday we saw each other. So it's really cool to have that happen. Don Fisher, aka DJ Fisher, but Don Fisher was another cool episode. He came over to my place and did a podcast over at my house, which is, it's mind-blowing that people will are willing to do that, drive and sit and talk and just have a podcast episode and hang out. So hats off to him. That was a really good episode as well, to kind of get his story on where he's been and what he's doing. He's doing all sorts of crazy stuff. He ended up coming to a couple jam nights too. He's played with a lot of people that have been on this podcast before, so hats off to him. That was a fun one. I don't even know if I want to mention any more of these solo episodes. There's too many of them. Just too many. Lee Klett. Lee Klett was somebody I met by complete happenstance. We were double booked at a venue. The venue made it right by everybody involved, and we sort of featured Lee Klett with Jesse Wilson band. So Lee would come up and do backing vocals, or we'd take a break, and instead of playing some music on a jukebox, Lee went up there and sang, and it was just like, holy crap, Lee's good. So I had to hit him up and be like, dude, you're coming on the podcast. And he did. A great guy, plays a lot of shows, and that's really cool. That's really cool. So hats off to him. That was a fun one. Another really, really great episode. Speaking of great episodes, Jeff Fosbender. That's another one. I've never really sat down and talked with Jeff before this episode. And I'd known him for a while. And he met me for the first time because he recognized my voice from the podcast, which absolutely blows my mind. It's not like my voice is all modulated and filtered on here. I mean, it is a little, but it's not I don't know. That's just kind of crazy that somebody recognized my voice. So we sat down and talked. Jeff's one of the nicest guys ever. It's super fun. For people that watch the Patreon, sometimes you can see my dad walk through the room. It's really, really fun because he just comes in. He's like, "You recording?" I'm like, "Yeah," and he just walks through anyways. So he's such a fun guy. But even my dad liked Jeff, and it's not that my dad doesn't like people, but he was just like, "That guy was nice," and it's like, yeah, Jeff's a nice guy. He's super fun guy, wicked talented. One of the funnest things about that was kind of doing this episode, just being like, I don't know if I've ever heard Jeff sing. And then I heard him sing recently, and I was like, holy cow. Jeff is good. So another one of those people that's super good at singing, which I think is it's not that there's people out there that aren't good at singing, but holy cow, there's some people out there that are really, really good at it. And it blows my mind. And some of that, once again, is just the fact that I'm just not the best at it. So I just got to keep going out there and doing it and practicing, just like I did with anything else that I got good at. Just like anything, it takes time. It takes, you got to have confidence and work at it. You got to be around people that can help you get better at it. And that's just what I got to work on. So, that was fun to sit down and talk with Jeff. Super fun episode, super fun guy. You guys got to check that one out. That was another one that got a lot of listens this year. So, Clint Riedel came back on the podcast. And if you think Clint comes on too much, Clint's episodes like consistently have some of the most listens. So everybody just loves Clint. I love Clint. One of my friends, I went disc golfing this summer and Clint was there, and it was funny because when we got done, Clint went back home, and then my buddy was just like, "Man, Clint's so nice. If you don't like Clint, I probably just don't like you." And it's like, yeah, that's probably right. Clint recently was on Big Don's Local Music Roundup. There we go. Nailed it. Clint was recently on an episode of that. Super fun episode. He had nice things to say about me and a lot of other people around our music community, which is super cool. So hats off to him. And, I really do appreciate, him doing that. So let me see. I got to write down a time code. If that sounded edited in, it's probably because it was. I just really didn't want to get it wrong. So, hats off to Clint for just being such a good guy and checking that stuff out. I don't know anybody else that drives halfway across the state and spends 10 minutes talking about how cool other people around him are. So, hats off to him. It's really, really cool to be able to do that. Jason Boggs, which is funny. I know 2 Jason Boggs. So, This Jason Boggs is the one that's the gear nut that plays in Red Dirt Renegade. So the other one owns a bar in Des Moines and books bands and also plays in a band. So maybe in 2022, I'll have to have the other Jason Boggs on just to confuse everybody. But that was a really fun one. I wonder how many people that I knew clicked on that one thinking it was the other Jason Boggs, and then it ended up being the other Jason, which is kind of how I opened the episode up. Was like, if it's not that one, but yes, it's that one. Because there's so many people that know both of them. The Jason Boggs I interviewed plays a zillion shows a year, and plays at Woolies, which was like wild to me. How'd it feel to play at Woolies? Oh, I've done it before. What? Like that? Okay, that's wild. I've never played at Woolies, so that would be another cool like venue or place to check off. And Jason's done it. We talked a little bit about gear in that episode and getting to where he's at, in his day to day. Another topic in that episode that was bridged that needed to be bridged was gear loss or gear breakdown or having your gear stolen at a show or et cetera. So we talked about that topic a little bit and how you can protect yourself against it. So that was a fun one. Scott Kirkhart came on again. Like I said, I almost bookended the year with Scott Kirkhart, which is kind of wild. He started Broken Strings, and he also started, which is what we kind of started out the year talking about, was Broken Strings. Or maybe it was somewhere around episode 100, because he was the first. He was a lot of firsts on this one. He was the first person I ever did a Patreon episode with. So hats off to Scott. Like I said, he started Broken Strings last year. That took off this year. I helped him out with a handful of things and did some setups on guitars and kind of, he spins ideas past me for certain things, which I'm sure he does for a lot of his peers. But it is kind of nice to know that like my opinion is valued to an extent by somebody, who's a musician in the professional world that's kind of bridging the two together. So hats off to Scott for doing all that crazy work. He's got a new band coming out. New band is going to be absolutely nuts. Guaranteed. I haven't heard them yet. Nobody has. And I just know they're going to be killers. So that's going to be sweet. You guys check that out. And then the most recent episode was the one with Jesse. So like I said, this year I've played a lot of shows with Jesse, and I'm very grateful for it. And I would have not gotten a lot of the opportunities I would have if it wouldn't have been for Jesse. I mean, Jesse essentially, I don't want to say gave me a job when I didn't have one, but, gave me the ability to play along with him, and he gave me some money for playing with him. So it's kind of crazy to think that there was a point in time there this year where I kind of relied on it. But hats off to him. I don't think he knows how much he means to me, and not to get all mushy about it, but yeah, I really appreciate everything you do, Jesse. You're killing it out there. It's also fun to watch him grow as a musician and a person while he's out there playing. So some of the first shows I played with him, we were kind of learning together as we were going. I was trying to figure out who he was as a musician. He was trying to figure out who I was. His set list has changed a lot over the course of the year, but even then, it's a lot of the staples have stayed in there, which is, once again, one of my favorite things about Jesse is pretty much you could come up and like name like an 80s country song. He's like, yeah, I heard that one. Or you can name like a 60s like bebop song. He's like, yeah, I heard that one, or it's like, here's a new country song. Yeah, I know it. Here's 80s hair band ballad. Like, yeah, I know it. He's heard all these songs. So when he goes to like attempt to play them for the first time, he usually can pull them off pretty well, which is, like I said, I think I talked about that just last week in that episode. So hats off to him. It's been such a wild year this year. And I don't know, ring in the comments section somewhere. What was the best part about your year? What about 2021 made it a good year for you? I've heard, like I said, everyone on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all the social medias, we all know it's just a place for everyone to get together and talk about things they have in common, but it's also a nice place for people to go and complain about stuff. So like I said, I started this episode out talking about how there's a lot of people saying 2021 was the worst year ever, and I can't wait to get to 2022. And all I have to say is I didn't mind it. It wasn't like it was everything I dreamed it could be, but holy cow, I just talked for a half an hour about, things I did this year, and it's pretty wild. So, count your blessings. You never know when it's going to turn back, to a place where it was like in 2020 when nobody could play shows. Nobody could go out anywhere and do anything. Nobody could go to work anymore, and that's kind of how I lost my job. I traveled around and played so many shows during the start of COVID before they officially shut things down that my job was just like, hey, there's a lot of elderly people here and stuff, so I think we're just going to have you stay home for a while until we figure out what's going on. And then that was pretty much just the end of it. And it was rough. It was tough. It's not like I barely scraped by. I've got a very good support group around me, so thank you everybody for that. But man, it was pretty wild to go through that, and I found things to occupy my time with. Like I said, last year, the year ended, and I was like refinishing guitars and rebuilding guitars. I had all these projects I had half done that I finally finished, which is kind of nice. It's kind of nice getting things finished. I'm kind of geared to be one of those people that likes to do things, but when you finish it, it's kind of bittersweet because it's done. I feel that way when I like read books and things like that, or watch TV shows, or like I said, start art projects and finish them. So it is kind of wild. Man, it's been such a good year. It's been such a fun year. I've got to meet a lot of great people. I mentioned a lot of them like just recently. I wonder how many people I met for the first time, either be over the internet or pretty much through the podcast last year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Almost half my episodes last year. So I think about 21 of the people I had pretty much never sat down and talked to ever. And not only did I get to sit down and talk to him, but you got to sit down and listen to what we had to say, which it's not like you're listening to us. It's almost like you're in on the conversation. I hear a lot of people say that. That's, why I like to talk radio. That's why I like podcasts, and that's why I like things like this. I feel like I'm kind of in on the conversation doing a lot of this stuff. So hats off to all those people that, took a chance on just some random guy with a random podcast talking to musicians and people in the entertainment industry in some fashion or another. A lot of us are just hobbyists. But, I love playing music, and I'm sure, the comedians I interview love being comedians. The pro wrestlers that I have interviewed, love being pro wrestlers. So hats off to that. And I'll tell you what, go out and see some shows. I'm so glad that they're available to play. 1 year ago, it was not necessarily the case. It wasn't as easy to book a show. So thank you guys for listening. I think I'm going to end this episode now, but I'll see you on the other side of the outro. Oh, baby, there's your year-end recap. We kept calling it a roundup. I don't know. 2 years ago, I called it a recap. I'll probably just title it as recap. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was a fun one. Sat down and talked about a lot of stuff that happened to me this last year. Most of it good. Fun time. Oh man, I hope 2021 was good to everyone else. If you guys want to check out the Audible Farm stuff, go to audiblefarm.com. And there's pretty much links to anything you want there, including other shows that are kind of like Audible Farm, and different, connections I've made, social media, the YouTube channel. You can go to the bottom and fill it out and contact me if you want to, and maybe be on a podcast episode. I had a few people that contacted me this year, and I didn't get back to them in a timely fashion. And then when I finally got back to them, they didn't reply. So, that happens. I apologize. It's not easy to always talk about like how busy I am, but I don't know. This is pretty much like my fourth hobby. So I apologize if I was not timely in getting back to some people this year. I will try and reach out again in 2022 to some of those people to see if they want to hop back on an episode or something. I do know a lot of people said they wanted to do an episode, and then it just didn't work out. So if there's anybody listening to this recap and you're like, oh, you forgot about me, well, hit me up. We'll try and do it. Let's get it done. My schedule's wild. It is absolutely wild. I'm going to give you some weird times that work for me, and hopefully we can find time to meet up, whether it be in person, remotely, in my studio, or over the internet. I've done all sorts of episodes. Before I did video episodes, which the videos are available on the Patreon channel. Costs $1 a month. You can go there. It's $1 a month. You get all the episodes as they come out. And I'm still going to try and do those. I still have aspirations of doing a side project on the Patreon channel. I just wish I had more time to do it. Hopefully this next year, maybe I'll find some time to do things like that. So check out the Patreon channel. Otherwise, the Audible Farm shop's got all your merch. I've been working a lot of overtime lately, so I've had a couple orders come in, and I've reached out to contact those people to let them know I will ship their merch out as soon as I can. I go to work before the post office opens, and when I'm done, they're closed. So it's unfortunate. I'm just gonna have to print everything off at home and see if I can have somebody else drop it off for me or something. Maybe run out on my lunch break and do it or something. But yeah, I don't know. Everything's just super busy for me lately, so I thank everybody for being patient with me while the episodes have come out, maybe possibly late, or people that have met with me on a short notice to do an episode to get one out there. So thank you guys very much for listening. Thank you guys for supporting the podcast, supporting your local musicians. It's not all about the podcast. It's about music. It's about going out there and realizing that these people that entertain us are actually real people, so hats off to everybody I interviewed this year. And hats off to everybody that listened. Go to audiblefarm.com, check it out. If you want to give me a late Christmas present, this is how easy it is. Go to youtube.com, hit the subscribe button. I don't know, I think we're 250 or something like that, somewhere around 250 subscribers there, which is a lot, for just being a locally based Iowa music podcast for the most part. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. There's other stuff on the YouTube channel. Those guitar refinish videos I talked about in the episode, as well as some live videos from bands around the state and people I've seen and recorded. So check those out. I don't do as many of those as I used to, but check them out. Tons of fun. So yeah, all right. I'm out of here for this week. I'm out of here for the year. I'll be back next year. All right. We'll check you guys later. Peace.